This is Fred Ricciani of TSC News. Check out our exclusive interview with Michael Kingston, author of the popular wrestling comic series Headlocked.
Headlock's about a kid who's a theater major in college who sort of unexpectedly falls in love with wrestling, and then he quits school, and it's sort of his journey through the business, starting on like day one. We're examining the craft of wrestling through the eyes of a performance artist, but at the same time, sort of navigating the underbelly of the wrestling business, trying to get to the bright lights and the big stage. So, a couple of different themes there. It's kind of a coming of age story.
Very cool. Now, you're involved with Jerry Lawler, who is your cover artist, and you also have a number of wrestlers contributing art and stories to your series. And the funny thing is, you told me off the air, is that you have more wrestler artists than actual comic artists.
Yeah, I mean, one of the big themes for Headlocked is about wrestling as an art form. And so to that end, we use a lot of wrestlers as artists. Jerry the King Lawler does the covers, and my interior artist is a wrestler from New Zealand, and his name is Mikkel Molapola. Wrestles under the name of Liger. He's got sort of a like a tiger mask kind of thing going on. And he's a really talented wrestler, and he runs a comic book store on top of that. So I couldn't think of a more perfect person to be the artist on this book. He understands, the business, and there's nuances in his art that I think, even I don't get, that workers would get, in terms of positioning and stuff. So it's definitely a real great collaboration.
Now, what came first for you? Your love for wrestling or your love for comics?
They both hit about the same time. I think I was harder into wrestling early. The first Saturday Night's Main Event got me hooked. George the Animal Steel, oddly enough, was the man who caught my attention enough to, kind of hook me for life. I always had comics when I was a kid, just, buying them at, like, drugstores and stuff. I got into collecting, kind of hardcore about the same time, maybe like 8 to 10 years old. So, they've both been very big influences on me, just about, for the bulk of my life.
And it's very tough to break into the industry, let alone be successful in it. You've been doing it for a little while now. How did you break in your first big break?
Everything we've done has really just been on our own. We've done, I started out, I have a studio, Visionary Comics, and, we work together, and we're all trying to get our stuff out there. But the comic book industry is a tough nut to crack. There's been a history of really bad wrestling comics. So I think it's sometimes if people don't understand wrestling, they think, oh, wrestling comics don't sell. And, I've heard wrestling fans don't read and all kinds of nonsense. I've been kind of told no for a long time, but, as we've progressed, I think, people are starting to see us in a different light, but it's definitely an uphill battle.
And what's helped you, of course, is your affiliation with all these wrestlers. How'd you originally get hooked up with King and all the guys that ended up contributing to your series?
When I started out, it was just me and my book and setting up in artist alleys at conventions and stuff. I met Shane and I met Rob Van Dam. They were just at Comic-Con as fans, and they happened by my table and they bought copies of my book. And both of them, reached out to me later on to tell me how much they liked it and, if there was anything they could do to help. And that's sort of what started the ball rolling. And then, as far as Jerry goes, it's the craziest thing, but I just emailed him through his website. It was such a lark when I did it. I forgot that I did it. And then one day I got an email back, and I'm like, this is probably his webmaster or something. And it was him. And he sent me some books, and I sent him some books. And then he's like, yeah, I'll totally do it. And he's done 3 covers for me. He's the regular cover artist on the book. We've done probably 20 conventions together. And I'm proud to call him a friend now. It's a crazy thing.
And he's got an amazing story himself. I mean, you're talking about comic books, and the story you have is great and Headlocked. But I mean, him coming back to life, like literally back in 2012. A lot of people thought, oh my God, we're going to lose the King. And now, of course, he jokes about it almost on a daily basis. What's it like not only working with him, but just kind of being around the guy, especially now that he's kind of got a new lease on life?
I mean, he's a great guy. you know, they always tell you not to meet your heroes, but you know, I've met a lot of my heroes, and they've been all really awesome. But he's a super generous guy. For you know, obviously people see his public persona, but he's one of the nicest guys I know. He says yes to so many things to people that he has doesn't need to. You know, he's super talented in a variety of things. He's done everything. I mean, he's acted and he's drawn and he's got a record out there, you know, from way back. I mean, he's literally done everything, and you know, but he's still a super down to earth, humble guy. And you know, like, I mean, obviously my association with him has put me in places that I probably never would have gotten. So you know, his generosity has, you know, made my life better. So it's cool.
Has the Comic-Con and Wizard World only helped you guys out in this business?
It definitely has, because I mean, on some level, a lot of the shows are pop culture shows. I mean, in the comic book business, no matter who we have attached, you know, sometimes who's on the upper left hand corner of your book, you know, in terms of a publisher, means more than what's in between the pages. And you know, in the comic book world, we're still an independent, but you know, at some of these pop culture shows, you get people that are more open to trying new things, and we've had a lot of success. You know, there's been a lot going around about the sort of explosion of how Comic Cons aren't necessarily just for comics anymore. And you know, I've heard a lot of old guard comic people complaining about, you know, like San Diego, they don't make money there anymore, and you know, we do really well at San Diego. I made a lot of money at San Diego this year. We killed in New York. Insane from bell to bell. We were tearing it up. So I think it's definitely been, we wouldn't have been able to get anywhere without that.
So you'd say the explosion not only has helped like the big brands like say Marvel and DC, but also independents like yourself.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think anytime you can get in front of people, you know, I think the media can be fairly impenetrable sometimes when it comes to comic books, and again, covering the big publishers. So, you know, for us to be able to bring our stuff right to the masses, you know, people will come to see Jerry or come to see Shane or Daniels and Kazarian or any number of, you know, Rob Van Dam, some of the had, and, you know, then they discover my book and then they become fans. So that's, you know, it's sort of the perfect storm where, you know, we all sort of benefit from it.
What's the biggest misconception about your career?
I mean, I think sometimes there's a perception of wrestling comics, and that's really why I wanted to write this book. I mean, being a fan of both my whole life, I've never really enjoyed a wrestling comic. I feel like most of them were licensed books that came out, you know, during the wrestling's hot streaks, where people are like, oh, you know, we could sell a bunch of these things to wrestling fans, and they weren't really about wrestling. You could tell they weren't really written by wrestling fans, and I think, you know, wrestling is a very polarizing thing, and sometimes when people, you can tell when people are trying to make a buck off of it. Like, say the mullets on UPN, they put that on after SmackDown, and the main characters were idiot wrestling fans, and you know, Ready to Rumble, obviously the main characters were idiot wrestling fans. So I think, you know, over the years, I think wrestling fans have been pretty savvy to, you know, realize when people are selling at them. But you know, Headlocked is a book about wrestling, and like I don't make a dime off of it. I don't really care. You know, all the money that we raise through Kickstarter pays for our art and our printing and our production costs. You know, this book's a passion of mine, and all the guys that contribute are passionate about wrestling and comics and art. And you know, we're not trying to put anybody over. You know, I have wrestlers that ask sometimes if they can, you know, hey, can you put me in your book? But, you know, like I said, I'm not trying to sell action figures or anything. We're trying to tell a cool story about something that we love. And I think sometimes, you know, when you hear the phrase wrestling comic, you think of, you know, Kevin Nash's Mad Max or Ultimate Warrior stripping Santa Claus naked, or, you know, some of the less successful attempts. So it's not just a wrestling comic. It's a good character-driven story. You know, it's a coming-of-age story about a kid who's coming of age in the world of wrestling. You know, so I think that, you know, for people who like cable dramas and that sort of thing, you know, it's not just a comic book story, and it's not just a wrestling comic book story. There's literally something for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, Headlocked's very engaging, and you definitely did a great job with it. And I'm wondering, since you are a guy that has this awesome character-driven story, Have you ever attempted to maybe get involved in the creative process of professional wrestling, or has anybody ever approached you about that?
I mean, I haven't. I've been backstage with Jerry, and I feel like it's a avenue I could try. But having met so many people in WWE creative, yeah, I've been backstage a couple times with Jerry and whatnot. I mean, you just kind of see you see the sort of defeat in their eyes. You know, I don't want to do something if I can't do it all the way. I think in a creative type of endeavor, I mean, I'd love to do it, but I mean, I think everybody knows when you write for WWE, you're writing for Vince McMahon,
Right.
and ultimately he's going to edit whatever you write. So it doesn't really sound like a fruitful thing. I mean, in a perfect world, yeah, it'd be amazing to book a wrestling show or book a promotion, but it's not something I think I'd want to. My time is so limited. I don't think I'd want to waste it if I couldn't. If I couldn't have any kind of creative control.
What's the best piece of advice you give any artist or writer?
Just don't give up. It's tough. It's tough every which way. I've been doing this for six years now, and we're still I'd say way more people don't know about us than know about us. But you just got to keep plugging away. I get people all the time that come up to me and they're like, "Oh, I had this idea for a story. It was just like The Walking Dead." And you can take that for whatever it's worth, but the difference between them and The Walking Dead is that Robert Kirkman put pen to paper and did it. And if you're passionate about something, if you want to do something because you're passionate about it, I think you can't go wrong. Just do it. That's the best thing I'd say. If you want to be a writer, write. If you want to be an artist, draw, and do it every day. And you'll get there at some point. It's a slog, but it's totally worth it in the end.
Well said, sir. Well, Mike, we really do appreciate the time. For more information, fans can visit headlockedcomic.com as well as at headlockedcomic on Twitter. Anywhere else?
We're in the middle of a Kickstarter for our next book. It's Kickstarter.com, and Kickstarter is what has allowed us, the big boys. We have a book up right now. We have 19 days left. Booker T is doing art for it. Tony Atlas is doing art for it. John Morrison, Frankie Kazarian, and AJ Styles are doing stories for it. So, we've got the campaign structured to where you can pledge for the first book. You can pledge for both books. It's both accessible and affordable for anybody who wants to sort of, jump on the train and see what we got cooking.
Very cool, very cool. Well, Mike, thanks so much for your time, man. Much appreciated. Best of luck with your Kickstarter.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you having me on.